on how Gametronics uses IoT or
Okay, so we are into theme parks industry where user walks in and gets a belt, right? And even like in the microplexes, that's the whole plan. So that belt is just like an entry belt for the user, but behind the scene we are collecting every single the mood, was the user's mood there. Not just that, what kind of rides he's, choosing over and over again, the reaction in those rides, like roller coaster. Earlier they used to have the swipe machine. That's just, that gives you the information that guy reaches there. And what happens after that? The frustration level, the other things, the capturing all that kind of data. How much time is he spending there in that particular place? How much time is he spending in the queue? And at the same time, when he's playing again, like the virtual reality has all the haptic systems, right? And all these are multiple sensors. Earlier, what we used to do is that you shoot at the person and you get a reaction, that's all. But now we collect that data also, and we actually see that what we need to do the next, and not we sometimes we actually completely remove a couple of rides because we see the user reaction has been really, really terrible, which is impossible to collect all those information unless you have a physical person standing there and watching that person react. So now, so with the entire intelligence is there. So that's what some of the use cases. So I would say, in a way, the theme park industry could not have grown if IoT and other things, otherwise it will remain stagnant. And that's the best way we can optimize the user experience, which is the key.
thank you. We'll come back again. Madhu, your views?
At Amazon, we provide the plumbing for IoT. So I'm going to sort of look at it from a cases standpoint of how people customers of us have actually built IoT, many of whom are on this panel. So the way I would like to say it is this. Let's take ride sharing as a business, right? Rental car business has been there for like decades. Ride sharing has come in today, right? With past what, less than 5 years. Now you cannot build that without the instrumentation and topology that's required in an IoT class system, right? Whether the IoT device is actually a mobile phone or actually telemetry in your vehicle is a material, right? You cannot do that. So that way I say, if you believe the Olas of the world are delivering value to you, yes, IoT is happening. Right? And you can see that with, for example, the game example he gave you, the examples that I see with, for example, what the factor automation examples that I see in the market, whether Schneider is doing it or GE is doing it with their power systems, etc. Right? All of these are classic examples of values being derived in the IoT space. Has it delivered on the promises? The question I really would have to ask you is what were those promises and who made it? But the real answer is people are deriving benefit out of it. I think rather than the question, is IoT delivering? The question is, are we creating new markets? Are we creating new business models with IoT? I think it's happening quite a bit very fast.
Okay, thank you. And I think Amazon rightly said is the plumbing and the pipe that takes all our money, right? Regardless of which business of IoT you're in. Thank you, Madhu. Ankur?
Yeah, hi. So I'll just look at this question from a little different perspective. Okay, see, we are doing injustice if we are putting IoT on center of the stage and saying you have not delivered. I think IoT cannot deliver anything. It has to be a combination of things which put together, which carves out a solution that delivers something at the end of the day. Well, IoT could not become that substantial amount of trigger for that yet. In certain areas, yes, but not at scale. Because a lot of other things around IoT is still missing. There are sensors generating data, but nobody knows how to use it. Or if at all they use a fraction of it. There is no intelligence that is still available. So the whole supply chain or a pipeline of data IoT to solution is not still constructed, according to me. Okay. So it's going to take its own sweet time. Well, 2 years back we thought it's going to be very, very fast. It's not happening like that right now.
Thank you. So a couple of points I want to add on to what they mentioned, particularly Madhu when he said, what are the promises, right? If you look at almost every corporate giant or the market research analyst firms, They all have a 50 to 100 page report on IoT, and in fact, some of them do every year. They all been promising endless possibilities that arise out of IoT digitizing the physical world, right? And what do we mean by digitizing the physical world, right? And the way GE describes it is, for every physical asset in the world, you create a digital twin on the cloud, right? So there is a model running on the cloud that mimics the behavior out in the field. So you have a digital twin, and then based on that, you monitor, control, and optimize, and most of it resulting from operational efficiency, right? And there are many other sectors that they talk about where the endless possibilities of IoT create like a $11 trillion opportunity, 40 billion connected devices. So that's the promise I was referring to, right? So have we reached half of it? Maybe not, but I think it's going in the right direction, right? So with that said,
One thing here, okay? Who's making that promise? See, people who make that promise wants you to buy IoT devices. You bought it, now what? You buy plumbing for AWS, now what? Okay? So essentially the hype is created by the companies that have immediate benefit in this industry, which is by selling a device or selling the plumbing, right? I'm sorry, your friend's still, right? So, right, but essentially, where do you go with that, right? So the hype is created by that promise is anyway, I don't think it's an accurate promise even when it is made, right?
right. So I'm going to stop Ankur here because, right, so enough Amazon bashing because he's promised t-shirts. The next thing I wanted to ask these folks is, where is the money, right? So let's say we are halfway through the myth, or let's say we are half the opportunity. Is the opportunity more in the business to business sector? Because that's one primary question that every entrepreneur gets asked, right? Are you going to serve the consumers, or are you going to serve businesses, right? So where is the money in IoT, right? B2B or B2C? Maybe I'll start with Madhu, because I'm going to put you on the best
He's
range.
decided to like dispute me constantly today. But anyway, that's a good thing. No, good fun. So what we wanted to do was, where is the money again? And go back to my example. Is Ola B2B or B2C? They make money, right? I mean, it works in both spaces. It's a fundamentally a consumer product. You see that. I will take another example. I'll take Amazon dash buttons. It's not there in India, but globally it is present. One button, order goes in, fulfills, shows up. Who is buying it is different from how it reaches the customer. Your monetization model could be very different on IoT as opposed to where the derived value can be. Right? And this happens across any number of different sectors today, especially in the digital world, right? You could monetize at one point, you could actually provide value at another point. And the bridging is how you build that digital bridge. So the Amazon dashboard is a classic example. The brands actually fundamentally sponsor it to the consumer pays a small token for expression of interest. It shows up and sticks itself to a washing machine or to a refrigerator or something. You press a button, automatically the product gets delivered to you. The levels of friction, the levels of automation, the levels of interference removed is quite high. That's another example. So these are simple examples of consumer-oriented IoT solutions that are on the market today that are providing value. Now, the minute you go into the B2B space, right, you have a completely new class of applications and constructs. I mean, I was the chief architect and then basically ran the Tata Fleetman product. This is a fleet telematics product. Now, if you look at it from a fleet telematics standpoint, if you improve driver performance, right, by even a margin of 5%, right, in the right way you change the gear, the way you apply your clutch and brake and the behaviors of driving, right, your fuel efficiency goes up by another 3 to 5%. Right? The impact on this in the economy is actually felt. It's not just the fleet manager feels it. The Indian economy feels a 3 to 5% trucking fuel efficiency improvement. Right? And that's a huge number if you do the math behind it. Now, the same thing happens when you start going into looking at what happens as GE is trying to do with aircraft maintenance or what they are trying to do with power generation. And practically anywhere that you come across where you have to do battery management today, right? You come across these scenarios where you have to have software interfaces that drive an IoT-based solution where you simulate, understand, learn the intelligence and drive it again, right? In the space of healthcare, Philips, right? All their photo imaging systems, their medical imaging systems, etc., they have put IoT. Those are all B2B solutions. I mean, is the number 50 billion plus? I'm not so sure. But is it providing value both in B2C, B2B? Where the monetization occurs, it's tricky. But I think that's a classical problem with anything we build. I don't think it is just a Like for example, today in the market, for example, do you know how Twitter will monetize? It's unclear, right? So with digital solutions, we have a monetization challenge. We got to understand where the value gets delivered and where the value is going to come from. And that's basically where I see it.
Okay. Maybe Rajat, you want to share your thoughts on where do you think the money is?
So again, wherever there is data, there is money. Very simple. So a fraction of that always goes to Amazon. No matter what you do. Yeah. Monopoly. Anyways, but the thing is that again, we derive data, and how we use the data is is the actual monetization. And as he rightly mentioned, every application in a way is like, in our case also it's B2B in a way. Like, it's a theme park which is paying, and the band or the haptic system or whatever is being delivered to the theme park. But the actual user is the consumer, right? So it's B2B2C kind of thing. We are actually collecting the data from them. But at this moment, I would say the actual money where it's being generated and stuff, automobile really is, way ahead, in terms of using IP and, creating money. So B2B is where the bigger cycle is at this moment, bigger monetization, like completely skewed towards that. But the applications are reaching, and at the end of the day, like if BMW gives me a, automatic kind of system plugged into my car, which is actually sending data all the time, to them. At the same time, cars are talking to each other. It's basically, I'm the consumer. I'm the product of this whole thing, because I'm not paying, but I'm the product. But the data is going to BMW, right? So it's being sold to BMW. So it's the case, So B2B is definitely where the money is, but consumers are giving them the data. And eventually to Amazon.
So in a way, it's B2B2C.
Exactly.
So that's what
it works.
Preeti or Ankur, would you guys like to add?
Yeah, no, I'm not. Right, see, I agree with Rajat. Okay, essentially, money comes from end consumers, right? But as startups, as businesses, you're trying to think IoT. I think the opportunity in direct-to-consumer IoT is there, but you have to be prepared for a lot of other things which are not ready. For example, services support, supply chain, etc. Right? So there are other challenges, other ecosystem components that are not in place right now to accelerate direct-to-consumer IoT products in at least a large part of the world. Okay. However, supplying a solution service to a company which has the capability of taking it direct-to-consumer is a more short-term visible opportunity that's very clear. Build a business, help them, and they will take it to consumers, ultimately get you the money and take a share in between. That's what I think is the opportunity, right?
You want anything to add?
So I think, yes, I agree in terms of the end consumer benefiting from IoT at this point, but definitely it's headed more towards the B2B for the monetization. And to pick a sector, I would certainly say healthcare is a space where it's still not being utilized to its full extent, because I think it's not just the connectivity of the devices, the amount of information that can help save lives. I think they haven't even gone anywhere close to that, whereas, having been in the healthcare space for some time, I do understand that even reaching technology like an iPad or a, video device to a doctor in times of emergency has helped save different things. So whether it's automated diagnosis, emergency reactions taking place, or applying medicines and interruptions, so many things can be done as part of the healthcare care pathway. So I think that's another sector where definitely there's lots more can be done.
Okay. I want to add my experience, because I run B2C as well as a B2B business for IoT solutions. And what we have seen over the last year and a half or 2 years, consumers are faster to adapt. So adopt your IoT solution. So B2C is you can be quick to market and start making revenue, whereas B2B, it takes a little bit more gestation time. But I think the growth is faster on B2B than B2C. So consumers are really quick to adopt anything new, because the decision-making process is really simple. It's one person who has to make a decision based on whether he can afford it or not, right? So in my opinion, B2C is faster. Maybe you can test the markets, but the real money and the volume is in B2B. So the next question I want to ask, and start with Preeti, is how do you think is the, or what do you think is the best way to monetize an IoT solution? Let's say you're an IoT provider or an IoT solution deployer. What is the best way? Is it SaaS? Is it outcome-based? What is your preferred revenue model?
Yeah, I think before I even get there, I would think first is creation of the ecosystem around the production of whatever we're using, the data that we're using out of IoT. Because I think in the absence of that, it's not just data that we could, just because they are connected devices, they're going to give me a lot of data. It doesn't get me anywhere. Because I think the natural progress, the way we think, humans think, I think we cannot take away from that. So in terms of even a product being designed, we cannot have a complicated thing, a sensor data coming in and say, now we are going to help you in decision support. It won't even help us. So I think the IoT outcomes have to be planned in such a way that the design of the products, the data, the frequency at which it's coming through, the ease of use has to be established first as part of the entire ecosystem consuming it. There I think lies the business model of whether it is outcome based or definitely then I think initially it has to start off as outcome based. It can certainly then become a services based because then everyone will know the ease of use. I think this transition to services always happens when there's ease of use, ease of consumption, and there's just that many ecosystems available for consumption. So in the absence of that, I think first it would probably be outcome based.
So outcome based, you guys agree? Madhu, you wanna?
I have a slightly, I'm going to sort of deviate a little bit outside and come back in. The minute we start putting measurable sensors and start collecting data and updating hardware, right? The basic thing that we do in this industry when you get to that is the fact that you reduce the lifetime ownership window of a device, right? I'll take a simple example, door lock. A traditional door lock, if you bought one of those big orangish, yellowish color things, typically stayed in your house for about 10, 15 years. How long do you think an IoT door lock will stay in your house? Do you think the protocols, the interface mechanics, the firmware, etc. will survive that window? I mean, 10 years ago there was no iPhone, I just about made it. 2007 was the first iPhone. Just let's get the math of the window of time right. So IoT, basically the minute you do that, the whole underlying business behind it is the construct that the lifetime value of that hardware shrinks. You add features, you basically excite the user, you start adding it very, very fast, right? So there's something very fundamentally different about this kind of thing. So that means when you think about the monetization model, you have to look at it from a standpoint of, okay, during that window that I'm expecting a consumer to use it, irrespective of where you monetize, that's an end person who's using it. At the point of usage, how long will it stay? What is the value it adds, right? What are the, what do you call it, the aha moments, the mind-changing moments that occur, that I create, and therefore that influence in the value of it. Then comes the monetization. Because if you're going to put a door lock out there that's an IoT device, you put a camera out there that's a security camera device, or you put a monitoring system on top of a windmill or on a furnace plant, irrespective of what you do, how long is that hardware going to stay? What is the value it's going to offer? Then the data and the AI that comes behind it. Because all of this something, the level of intelligence you offer is going to change the monetization fabric behind it. Right? Because there is cost behind somewhere else. The lock could be cheap. The IoT and the AI that I'm going to generate from the lock could be very, very expensive. More than the cost of the lock itself. So you have to think about that monetization very differently at that point. Whether you're going to pre-package it one time at the point, like a dash button is a one-time purchase, $4.99. Right? You don't pay for it afterwards. But the real monetization is happening because I don't allow you to comparison shop anymore. If you think about it, you bought a dash button, stuck it to your washing machine, every time you press that button and say Tide, you're not comparison shopping Tide with something else. You made your decision that you're buying Tide for a very long time.
It's because you own the customer, right? I mean, at that point, it's an
correct. The brand owns the customer at that point. When you press that button, the whole friction has been removed, and that means the monetization is actually the Tide washing machine powder that's coming to you. It's not that button anymore. Right? So you have to look at those kinds of constructs of what is the mechanics of friction you're removing and where you're disrupting it. Then the rest of the picture comes into play. It is not simply a matter of, I give a piece of software or hardware, can you give me a price for it? Because if you look at it that way, it's what we're going to find ourselves is a very fundamental pattern of, it's sort of as a mock fake, right? We basically look at what our business was before and we're trying to replicate it. That's not where it will work, I believe.
Thank you. And Rajat, I believe you are a user of IoT to enable your business or to enhance the value of your business.
Right. So for me, monetization is not part of this, but again, it's the sense we derive out of IoT, is what matters, and that is of the extreme value. And that value is again created by, again, if I can convert all that, stuff into a dashboard, then it's real value for me. And then whatever business model I want to create around it, I'll give you a very simple example. A pedometer that has been around for 20-25 years, but then Fitbit happens, the other one happens, and all those things, then change the complete game, in a way. People actually started doing those things because they actually made sense out of that data. They created the gamification around it. We are playing against your Facebook friends, right? That's the meaning of that data, and that was something what actually changed. How many other pedometers you know of? How many other pedometers did that kind of, exceedingly well? Fitbit survived. Fitbit did great and other things because again, they were actually deriving sense out of that data, and that's exactly what we do. And again, creating business model is a personal choice. What works for you, you will decide. I just need to derive some sort of sense around it.
Understood. Thank you. So let's go to data, right? I know, sir.
So I agree with Madhu, and very well point that he pointed out. Okay, just want to add one small view to it. Okay, it's not just IoT. The whole world is moving towards solution as a service. I'll tell you, we practice machine as a service in AI. There is Michelin tires giving tire as a service. Rolls-Royce is making jet engine as a service. They are actually charging for the uptime of the engine from the airlines. Okay, so whole world is moving towards a solution as a service because you can now measure everything, you can connect everything to KPIs, and sooner or later your customers are going to be aware about it and demand that. So if you're building your model on selling a solution which is not linked to KPI, that is not going to work out. And if you link it to KPI, you might as well charge it on a subscription basis instead of just selling it.
Perfect. So it's in one way or the other what problem you solve and the outcome you create out of that, right? Good. So moving to data, I think data is the central piece of any IoT solution. And I know Hardify plays a role in that. Data is your central piece. So I think enough has been talked about dashboarding companies, showing data, real-time data, analytics and all that. But how do you get deeper insights and more prediction and artificial intelligence built into that? And Ankur, I want you to share some thoughts on how you do that and how you monetize that in terms of the data points analyzed, or is it the outcome again that you talked about?
So how do we use data? Well, we practice heavily data in motion. We analyze data in motion. We discourage data at rest because the costs of data at rest is going to be growing substantial, both analyzing and storing it. So more and more systems are now coming which are enabling analyzing data when it's on the motion. Number one. Number two, our vision for 2020 is what is your ROI per GB of data that you are generating, right? So we want to practice a KPI where you are able to link an enterprise revenue, lead enterprise KPI with the core fuel of that growth, which is the data, right? And that's going to happen, right? And how we charge, how we would like to price it, we would like to price it linked to ROI that is generated. It's the same thing. We say we're going to charge you for X millions of data points that we analyze, and we're going to charge you a percentage of the revenue. It's going to be the same thing eventually, right? So we may start with the earlier one because it's not easy for clients to absorb it, but eventually we want to head to where we say the percentage incremental growth we give you because of this whole data gamut that we put together, AI, data, IoT, everything, don't worry about it. Just give us this incremental value that we generate, a share of that.
I want to add another question before I move on to the other panelists. So your venture is more horizontal, right? You don't care whether the IoT solution is from healthcare or logistics or whatever. How do you make sense of all kinds of data?
Well, it's data, right? So, see, what we do is pure mathematics, and we see data as data. We don't add our biases or domain rules or any enterprise rules upfront. We practice unsupervised intelligence first as our methodology. So we say let the data and machine figure out what's inside, and then once you have that, let the humans figure out how to interpret that result. Okay, so that's why we are horizontal in nature. We have a very good partner ecosystem which bring in financial domain expertise, marketing expertise, or respective domain expertise. They interpret results from our system and then they build an enterprise solution. And this is the reason we fit very well in the ecosystem without displacing anybody in this. So a company which has been doing 20 years servicing financial domain customers on various cycles of technology, now they can just plug us up in them without being threatened by us, our existence, or without being threatened by AI existence. So that's the value at which you create things.
Thanks, Ankur. Madhu, Amazon. What's Amazon's role in analytics or artificial intelligence or machine learning when you're hosting a third-party IoT app?
So let me start with what we say. Data is gravity, right? So what we mean by that is basically, right, our role is to provide you all the necessary plumbing to store, process, at rest or in motion, analyze, at rest or in motion, to generate the necessary real-time feedback, right? Massive amounts of compute power, massive amounts of storage capacity that's offered. I mean, most of you probably who are using AWS already know that. Then comes the next level layer is the managed services and other things that we offer, through which you have the ability to take it to the next level. In the case of IoT, we have AWS IoT as a managed service, but customers can build it without that service as well. You can build direct IoT services without it as well, and customers are doing either way. Right? Then comes third-party partners, right? Whether it is C3 IoT or you take GE, any of these companies who build models on top of us, engines on top of us for data ingestion, data processing, visualization, etc. that is there. And finally, on top of all of this is our AI layer that we bring to the table so that you can take this data and start doing either deep learning models or predictive models that you want. I mean, effectively the plumbing, right? And that's what we offer. This data could be block, which is binary, which is images, could be video, could be voice, etc., which you can see many examples of in the market today, or it could be raw sensory bytes that's coming from a number of different sensors that you can use to predict. So in the case of Philips Imaging, they want to start predicting, actually not Philips Imaging, there's a company, startup actually, that I met with. They want to detect, for example, tuberculosis conditions, right, from your cough, just by the timber coming out of your cough, right? That means you collect enough data, process it, understand what that is, and then analyze and provide the data, right? And that means you store those AI patterns in the system through which we do, and all the necessary pieces through which you can do this, whether it's AI systems, GPU compute power. We recently launched P3 instances, which is 1 petaflop per machine. Just to give you reference point, 1 petaflop is 100 times faster than the Param supercomputer on 1 VM. Right? It's less sub $20 to launch it for some time. Right? That's the kind of processing power you get. Of course, data storage and whatever you want to do on top of it.
Thank you. Rajat or Preeti, would you like to add something on data, how you use it, or?
Yeah, I think Ankur has covered most of it. As the key point is, I think we're going to keep this whole intelligence agnostic to the verticals, because again, as I said, data at the end of the day is data. But certainly the rules that the domain experts bring into the various domains is what is the value add that we get to interpret the data. So I think that's where there is a good marrying between the data and the domain aspects as well. But certainly, yes, I think data is there, as you said, and I think there's more data than possible for everyone to process. I think with the compute power and the data storage, all of that becoming so cheaper right now, I think there's lots of data and everything is being collected because we never know what is useful. It was like the metrics of the earlier days. Everyone used to collect metrics and we never knew what we were going to do. It's like climbing, how many stairs did I climb today? Was, that's kind of thing. So I think we also have to get smart about what data we need to interpret and what needs to add to that intelligence.
In fact, I was reading an article some time back and it said that on an average, only 1% of the data collected is being really used to gain any insights. The rest are all just sitting on his cloud. Okay.
So actually we deal with not just what you do, but what you experience. And that's where, again, understanding, like we were discussing, it's T-1 approach kind of thing, what you're going to do, so it's just predictive analysis and other things, so again, going back to the same thing, what I've been repeating, data means, again, as he also mentioned, data is the gravity. And what we churn for is that what you're going to experience next time when you walk in there. How we are going to actually, cut down on your frustration level and increase your entertainment value over there. And especially like with the Jadoo scheme of thing, which is basically microplaxes for tier 2, tier 3 towns, where basically we are trying to give the cool exposure to this small town people, the same kind of PBR kind of experience. And it's all about, those guys have never experienced something like this, right? So understanding their behavior to that entertainment thing is again, big. We don't know, So that's where we need to collect tons of data and keep on optimizing, and keep on working towards making probably 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth one should be most perfect, understanding the behavior of the people and stuff. So that's exactly what we're going to use this data for.
Thank you. Data is the new gravity. That's the first time I'm hearing it. Data is the new oil is what I've been hearing, but data is the new gravity according to Amazon. So with that, we'd like to open up for questions from the audience. Please be specific in your question and the panelists that you would like the answer from.
Coming to the hardware interface, we were discussing about the lifetime of the hardware devices, and you said big money is lying in B2B markets. In B2B markets, people value money and they expect some value for every penny they spend. And only when the hardware interface has quite a lifetime value, where they can actually get a payback, something kind of return on investment, there will be more interest and there will be more growth in the long term. How do you see this?
You like any particular panelist to answer
This is open to the panel.
I think you talked about lifetime.
Okay. Let me try and see if I get your question right. The question was, if the lifetime value of a piece of hardware is shorter, how do you monetize it in a B2B model? Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, even before they could realize the value of the solution, if the lifetime is over, then there's no point in investing in that.
No, that's not the way it would work, right? It would work upside down. The thing is, if your cost of the hardware is more expensive than and when I say hardware, it's not just the physical item price and the duration is required. That means you must generate enough value out of it. That's a product definition problem, right? You must generate enough value out of that product. Consumers should derive enough value so as to be willing to pay. Right? If they are not willing to pay, then that product has a product market fitment challenge. That is, to me, that doesn't have to be with IoT. You can do that with this glass tumbler. I can take a crystal glass and say, I'm going to charge you 15 lakhs for it, and it will break every 15 days. It won't sell. It's a product market fitment challenge. I don't think it's a lifetime value challenge. Remember, when you look at the IoT stack, you have to look at it not just as hardware, right? It's hardware, embedded software, IoT solutions in the transmission, data ingestion, data processing, visualization, AI. Each piece of that puzzle is part of IoT. So that's the reason that makes it interesting. You don't have to solve all aspects of the problem, right? There are people who specialize only on one end of the spectrum, there's people who specialize on the other end of the spectrum, and people who specialize in between, or people who provide a holistic solution. All of that exists in the market today. But yeah, if there's no way for you to derive value, you're not going to probably sell it.
Thank you. And I can add to it, I think if you're talking about field devices, not the wearables that a consumer uses, there is issues like battery life, so your ROI period definitely needs to take all that into effect, right? So if you're going to touch the device again or recall the truck or anything or the machinery that you've installed your sensor to come back for charging or a battery replacement, then all those need to be figured into the ROI, right? Yeah, so that is another thing, right? How you're going to, so anything to do with labor in terms of the developed economies is expensive. So that needs to be figured in. But I think Madhu touched on it. The product market fit would determine most of the hardware ROI.
Thank you.
This is something new for me, so my question is not going to be specific, but I like listening to you guys. And there's something which I experienced last month, and this is in the health sector, so my question is to Preeti. So the patient had to be moved from a B-class hospital to a A-class hospital, and it was an emergency. But what frustrated me as somebody supporting the patient is like, there's a lot of data missing, because it's like you're always called in to ask for additional data. And in an emergency setup, there is, if you're lucky, the specialist is there. If not, the duty doctor corrects another 15-20 minutes it takes. And by the time the patient is taken, so that's first question. So there's a whole lot of data missing there. Second thing is the reports which are already done at the B class, and then there's a lot of repetition, there's a cost. So I was wondering, where does your IoT fits in? Is that an opportunity in terms of saving time, money, and so on?
Absolutely, I think it's a wonderful question, and I think if I heard you right, you're a person who's supported a patient who's gone through the journey. That's exactly what this is all about. As I said, when I've dealt with healthcare and we've had just iPad devices supporting a doctor for during an emergency, and while the patient is just being rushed in an ambulance, the ambulatory messages from the ambulance being transmitted back to the doctor and the emergency room kept ready for the incoming patient made a huge difference. So in your case, when you're saying...
What you're saying is that is not actually available.
Absolutely, I agree. That's exactly where we
even
need to go.
Even in the brand is supporting, sponsoring, even that ambulance doesn't have any facility to transport it to the...
Absolutely. I think that's again the huge problem of connectivity. I think if we are marching towards that common electronic health record, right? So how many hospitals today sign up for that? That's exactly the problem we have today in India and in the developed. But whereas in developed countries there exists an electronic health record where the record is transferred directly to the upcoming hospital or to the referral or to the emergency. So there's just a single patient record. We have to get there, but certainly it's a great opportunity. Like, let's take an example of 3D printing devices. I just heard recently about one of my friends at the SIMS hospital in Chennai, where a 3D printing device was used to actually mimic the heart surgery, which was very complicated, and they were able to make 100% success on the actual operations. So there are places where technology is helping, but your point is absolutely right. Unless, that's why I've talked about the ecosystem not being ready. So while we have the technology in place, I think the ecosystem that needs to receive all of this, the hospitals that have to sign up for these devices, the devices can produce all the sensor and all the data. The hospitals need to be able to get it and then start using that data rather than repeating the tests. So that's definitely part of the ecosystem's adoption of the technology. So I think that's what we've got to push for rather than the technology itself, because I think technology is available, compute power is available, data can be captured because sensors are placed there, but then how do we use it? Unless everyone signs up for it, the value add is for the end customer, who's actually the patient at this point. But yes, I think the whole system, the ecosystem and the hospitals, in the healthcare space especially, that's why I started off that way. I think there's a huge piece that's missing in the healthcare sector and that can really utilize it. And the emergencies and patients and their lives can be saved. It's a huge life-saving device, literally, if you will. It can save lives. That's the extent of what we're trying to do, rather than just, able to control a temperature in a room or able to switch off devices. That's the last thing when you compare life-saving devices. So I think that's where the critical focus should be. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And I want to add one more to it is, I think you can split that problem into two. One is the latency part, which I think has been solved. Technology is there. There's no latency. Real time is real time. The second one is the connectivity. I think that is where still in most parts of the world IoT is struggling because of the connectivity issues. So I think that'll get better as the ecosystem grows. So hopefully that problem will be solved.
In respect to time, we will not take any more questions. You can tweet to us, our speakers. If you have any questions, we'll get your questions to them. Thank you to our dear panelists. Can we have a huge round of applause for our panelists? Mr. Sivakumar, Mr. Madhusudan Shekhar, Mr. Oja, Mr. Garg, and the lovely Ms. Preeti Narayanan. Thank you very much for joining us at TiECON Chennai 2017.